So we're talking about controlling the game, controlling the tempo. For me, that comes from the midfield. That's where you get most of the control in your game. Against Greece, Josh Cullen didn't control the game. He didn't control the tempo. And against Gibraltar, it just seemed like he did not have the capabilities or perhaps the imagination, or even maybe it was the lack of options. He didn't seem to want to go forward with the ball at all. For me, he's not a very progressive player, and maybe that's down to the fact that the 8 is not the same Burnley 8, or he doesn't have a natural number 10 with Jason and Malumbi. But what does Josh Cullen need for him to play better for Ireland, to get the Burnley version of Josh Cullen? Because he was Player of the Year in the Championship, so he must have something about him. But for Ireland, especially in the last 2 games, I didn't think we got what we needed from him in either way.
I'd swap the word especially in the last 2 games for only in the last 2 games. Was the first. I mean, you've just said what do we need to do to get the Burnley version of Josh Cullen. I would have said what do we need to do to get the Ireland version of Josh Cullen, because for me, up until these 2 games, he's been flawless.
Well, I gave the ball away to Pavard.
Gave the ball away to Pavard, that's true. Definitely not flawless. Yeah, that was a flaw. But I have thought he's obviously, I'm always going on about him, and that's why it's fair to throw it at me. He had, there's no doubt, he had a really poor couple of days. I think that is partly him, and I think it's partly everything that was going on around him. He still wasn't awful on Friday night. Like, again, he got on the ball. I'm pretty sure he got on the ball more than any other Irish player. I think he had the second highest pass completion rate of any player.
Well, you see, he's always an option. I will give him that. He's not afraid to get on the ball. That's one thing you can't criticize him about. My problem is what he does when he gets the ball. Often, for me, he's far too quick to choose the safe option and go back to the defenders. He doesn't turn on the ball enough. He's not taking the ball in the half turn enough. And sometimes, and I thought this was especially evident against Greece, he plays when he does go forward, he plays a straight pass into the forwards that have no option to play the ball to anybody else coming on a run. So for me, progressively is where he really needs to improve.
Yeah, and look, again, to me, there's just a complete disparity between what we'd seen up until this weekend and what we saw at the weekend. I would agree with almost all the observations you've made about him in terms of what he did with the ball in these 2 games. Why he was like that in comparison to how he normally, okay, he's never the world's most expansive passer. He's never going to be spraying balls around the place and playing defence splitting passes through, but I mean, neither did Xavi, do you know? He does what he does, and he normally does it really, really well, and moves the ball on to others then I would argue it's up to them to then to provide the creative spark. But his use of the ball on Friday night was not of the standard that it normally is. I'd agree with you. I'd question his body shape even on a couple of occasions. How many weeks has he finished? Is it down to rustiness? I don't know. That's the obvious conclusion that you jump to. I think that's maybe letting him off the hook a little bit too easily. I'm not sure what got at Josh Cullen over the weekend that he wasn't at the...
He didn't play well, and he grew into the game last night, but some of his passing in the first half was really simple passes just out of play. How are you meant to legislate for that? I think obviously one of the issues in Greece is the fact that the team broke down around him. Again, Ireland's, you want to look like the passing map or the average positions. Malumbi's average position is actually slightly behind Cullen. I've no idea how that happens. And there was also basically no option to his left. No. I mean, everything had to go.
That same map, you've seen it too, so I'm sure the average touch map for the Irish players against Greece, Callum O'Dowda had the deepest. He had the furthest player back for Ireland.
And it's easier for Cullen to look like a better passer if he it's too easy to take the ball off him if he's always going to go to the right.
Yeah.
Which that happened in that game, and he just had no options to the left. In fairness, he definitely didn't hit his levels. He was way off it. Defensively, he was pulled all over the place because of those switches of play that we talked about. But just the Irish team, and in an attacking sense, just kind of broke down. Everything came down the right, and I know that was probably coached to kind of Doherty Smallbone into the box for Ferguson, and maybe even hopefully O'Dowda breaking it, cutting in off the left. But O'Dowd is an attack, is a forward converted into a left wing back, and that game ended up turning him into a defender. Like that was a bad selection, really.
But I do see, I understand where you're coming from, but at the same time, I did see remarks that, we've seen tonight what Josh Cullen's real level is, and he's going to get found out in the Premier League and all of that kind of stuff. I disagree. I think he's had a bad couple of days. He would be probably near enough the first name on my team sheet going into the September games, and I would expect and be backing him to bounce back from it. Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong, but I wouldn't be too quick to write him off, while agreeing that the performances were well below his level.
Yeah, it just seems that there's almost a lack of trust between the three midfielders at times, that maybe Josh Cullen is so comfortable on the ball that he's, Jason Malumbi, he is a good player, but he can be quite erratic in many ways at times, on the ball and off the ball. And then Jason Knight is further forward. I don't think he's a naturally central player all that much. I thought he was much better last night on the right as a right wing back, or sort of getting forward alongside Smallbone. It just seems that there is that little bit. We're lacking at least one extra player in the midfield that can take the ball under pressure.
Yeah,
and maybe is that Smallbone that should be there, that should be playing more centrally as the number 10, as opposed to the link up man with the right wing back.
Maybe just like we saw kind of his defensive limits, say, against Greece in terms of small ball. But if I'm Josh Cullen, like, okay, I'm playing against Greece, I've now got no pass to my left because the Irish, that flank for Ireland is broken down completely, and I'm going to pass it into midfield to Malumbi or Knight or whoever with their back to the opposition goal with pressure behind them. Do I trust them not to lose it in that very dangerous position? No, I don't. Because Ireland just don't have that level, unfortunately, don't have that level of technical quality in midfield. And, a lot of kind of Stephen's selections and so forth is always a mitigation against the limitations of the players. That's why 3-5-2 kind of makes sense, because Doherty's a good creative outlet down the right. Ireland kind of have to play down the wings in a lot of sense, because that's where their most creative players are. But also, if they lose it, it's less dangerous. This is a problem with like the 4-3-3. Like Ireland's lack of real technical quality in front of Josh Cullen in that midfield is going to be a problem forever, until maybe Joe Hodge can be an answer in there, maybe not. Otherwise, like, Ireland will always be hamstrung by that issue. And like, we love big, wide existential crisis, and maybe let's not get stuck into them. But the issue is that Ireland are among very few European nations in the last 15 years that completely abnegated the responsibility for development of players. So shipped them off to England, and as a result, our players have been developed on the terms of that club. So hence, the players that we've generally come through, Black Swan event, Evan Ferguson aside, have been massive, big physical centre halves and goalkeepers, most of whom are born in the first half of the year, so have enjoyed that kind of physical advantage forever. Whereas the academies across Europe have kind of incubated their own players in a kind of a 4-3-3 of wide forwards and kind of dainty number 8s. Ireland, because they haven't had that joined up thinking, haven't been able to produce those players. It's why Stephen Kenny has gone effectively shopping in the passport market to get wide forwards. So Mikey Johnston looks like he'll work. CJ Hamilton, we hardly knew ye. He was brought in. I don't think we'll see him again. But that was an attempt from Stephen Kenny's point of view. He knows that is an issue, like, in fairness, and that was his attempt to fix it. So, Stephen Kenny, for all of his rhetoric, is still working within the parameters of every other Irishman under the last 15 years.
And, as a nation, we're not the most physical. We're big and strong, but God, are we slow. So that doesn't help in midfield either, because, again, like we're saying, you can be more expansive. You can take a more advanced approach. Josh Cullen could push forward a little bit more if they had, a Wilfred Ndidi or someone playing as a centre defensive midfielder, or someone who has pace and power and isn't that all that good in the ball but can sniff out danger. Jason Malumbi, I think, can sniff out danger very well, but he doesn't have the pace to get there. So often at times he's coming rushing in and generally gives away a foul, can get booked quite easily, or he's out of position then when the opposition gets there first. I think if you look at take the Timicas as an example, one of the reasons he looked so good against Ireland is because he's so physical, he's so fast, he's so much quicker than the rest of our players, and that's a big issue, and it's not one that we can really sort, because as a nation we're just not that quick. So I mean, we're almost 15 years
Yeah.
behind where we should be in development.
Yeah, I think as a nation we're not that quick is changing, because the demographic of us as a nation is changing, I suppose. But we are still very much at the stage where we produce either the technical player or the athlete, if you get me.
Yeah.
Where we
don't
haven't
have
got
both
to the
yet.
stage yet where the technical player is the athlete. Like, you look at Camavinga and Tchouameni for France.
Yeah.
Like, do you know what I mean? They have got the technical ability and more of a Josh Cullen or anybody else who we would regard as our technical players, and they've got the athletic abilities of an Ogbene. Do you know? And we're a good way off being able to produce something.
But
like
that all
yet.
comes back to, again, that broader issue of, the physical players are the ones, the athletes that, so you say, like the centre halves that we have, are the ones that can make an earlier impression in English academies, and as a result benefit from this kind of broad environment of like brilliant sports science, brilliant S&C, brilliant physical training. Whereas our kind of more technical, generally smaller players, it's so much harder to make an impression in that world. So as a result, they're at a lower, if they want to break into first team, they're at a lower level, or they're in Ireland. I mean, like, the coaching is perfectly good in Ireland. It's just the amount of it, and it's that all that other stuff that goes around to creating players, like S&C, like physical training, like whatever else. So that's where we're lagging behind as well.